Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
Purple Daily. Live from not Manhattan, but somewhere in New Jersey. And I got bad news for you guys. Bad news. We did not win the Marconi Award for Best Podcast last night. Unfortunately, we were beat out. I don't even remember the name of the podcast. It was a Spanish-speaking comedian podcast. Judd, you're muted, by the way.
That's 2 losses in 4 years. I'm so disappointed.
You know, I've been thinking about this, though. I think it's better that we don't win these high-end radio podcast industry awards because we spend 365 days a year obsessing over a team that has never won the big prize, right? It would run antithetical to what we do every day if we were to win a Marconi or some other industry award for best
In
podcast.
fact, we need 2 more defeats. That's what we need.
We do to get to equal them.
We'll have the 4.
I know.
The synergy.
So we're actually rooting for a finalist again next year and losses. Before we bring our friend Thor Nystrom in from Fantasy Life, you know, I'm kicking myself because I'm flying back to the Twin Cities today. I was gonna bring my 32-ounce souvenir Pepsi Justin Jefferson cup, and I literally left it on my desk on the trip over here. But you can get your brand new 32-ounce Justin Jefferson souvenir cup inside local Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh locations right now. There's a QR code on the cup where you can enter to win Victor's Ride, a glorious Vikings-themed Polaris ATV that Jason from Egan won last year. They just drove it right up to his place in Egan. Pepsi is also giving away a solo pizza stove and Vikings autographed merchandise as well. So go get your Justin Jefferson souvenir cup. A bunch of you have already sent your photos to me at Phil Mackey via Twitter/X. You can pick these cups up at any Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh location. And before we get into a Thor's Day here, gentlemen, if you are a Twins fan and you also listen to Purple Daily, the Twins are for sale as of today. The poll ads have put the team up for sale. Just shocking news for Twins fans. There is a scoop session with Doogie where we digest it live. You can find that at Minnesota Sports with Mackey and Judd and the Score North YouTube channel. And the Score North Twin Show podcast feed will have more as well. But let's get him in here. Thor Nystrom. Happy Thor's Day. He's a content machine. Fantasy, betting, Vikings. You got your KU hat on today. What's up, Thor?
How you guys doing, man? It's a good time to be alive, to be a Vikings fan. This is pretty crazy and undefeated on another continent now as well. So it's a good time to be a Vikings fan.
So here's the question we want to pose to start the show today. It's a good time. It's a Week 5 bye. We can all kind of exhale, kick our feet up, and we can survey the landscape here. So I'm going to pose this to all of you. We'll start with Thor. To what extent, now that it's like, wow, the Vikings, a surprise start. They are 5-0, tied with the Chiefs, undefeated. They've got the number 1 point differential in the entire NFL right now. To what extent does this go from a really fun start that was unexpected to, whoa, they can like win the Super Bowl here in a few months, Thor?
No. Yeah. How dominant in the first 5 games against the competition that they were playing, I don't see how you can. I thought it was funny that Ringer had put out a NFL Power Rankings. They still had the Vikings 7th, even though the Vikings had beaten 2 teams above them on that list. The Texans and the Packers also beat the team right behind them, the 49ers. And then, of course, the Jets. Those 4 wins, the Vikings trailed for a combined 0 seconds on the clock. More head coaches got fired from those teams than seconds that the Vikings trailed on the clock in those 4 games combined. This team has been dominant so far. Does that mean that it's going to be that way? Of course not. And we're Vikings fans. We understand how this goes. But at least what we have seen on the field so far, and then also the way to project it forward, this team is absolutely for real.
It's incredible to say, but Thor's right. If you look at the conference, right? If you look at the conference and you say, okay, what are the roadblocks? What are the true roadblocks? Well, they beat San Fran, which might be fine. I don't know. Detroit is, and they are going to play Detroit coming back from the bye, but they are 100% have to be considered to be at least very much in the mix, atop the list to be the Super Bowl representative for the NFC right now. I don't see teams where I'm like, oh boy, Philadelphia, watch out now, right?
I mean, we shouldn't gloss past Detroit,
I agree.
And we'll find out what those teams look like against each other. But yeah,
but like if you're asking, should they be considered a threat? Yes, absolutely. Now, a lot has to play out, but I guess my question is this. What have we seen that makes us cringe a bit? The last 6 quarters have not been great, but that being said, you still won both games. So yeah, I have been discounting the Vikings since the summer, and I feel like that has now become, until I'm proven right, it's become a mistake on my part if I continue to say, oh, they're going to flop. I don't know that they're going to flop.
I mean, did anyone I don't know if you've discounted them. I'm gonna defend you from yourself right now. I don't think. Is there anyone that had ownership on the island of the Vikings are a Super Bowl contender?
Probably not.
None of us 4 did. I mean, all of us were like Thor, Dex. We were all sniffing around maybe 8-9 wins. Best case scenario is maybe they can sneak in as a wild card team. Is there anyone outside of voice of the Vikings, Paul Allen or somebody, did anyone stick a flag in the ground and say back in June or after J.J. McCarthy got hurt and said, guys, you're not seeing it clearly. This is a team that's going to win about 12 or 13 games, number 1 seed in the NFC, and play the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I don't know that was like a thing in the NFL or Vikings media or fan ecosystem, Thor.
Shout out to Nick Swartzen. He might have been the only one I heard on the Rich Eisen show over the summer. Where
yeah,
I think
that's true.
He said 15-2, but I heard Vikings fan, for people that don't know. But yeah, I mean, as far as media folks or even folks inside the NFL, this is stunning to a lot of people. And you might have had one-off sort of predictions that turned right, like, oh, I think Sam Darnold could be pretty good in this system, or I think the defense could be top 5, 6, 7. For everything to have gone the way that it is so far, and for the team to play as well, if someone's out there that predicted that publicly, come forward. But yeah, I certainly didn't see it.
I think when you're looking at the bones and the DNA of teams in the NFL, there are some good all-encompassing analytical, and these aren't perfect, but if you look at DVOA and expected points added, especially if you remove garbage time from the EPA rankings, it does tell a story usually over the course of a season. You can look back at last year and wonder, who were the best teams by the eye test, by the record? Does it line up with DVOA and EPA? And this year so far, the Vikings are number 1 in the NFL in DVOA, offense and defense combined, and number 1 in the NFL by a mile in expected points added, offense and defense, when you take away garbage time. It's funny because they've actually been batting garbage time when they're up 28-0 or 17-0. That is technically garbage time, according to these analytics. So the Vikings their biggest flaw is they don't handle garbage. They don't handle it well when they're up by 3 scores in the second or third quarter. They sort of fumble all over themselves. But unlike 2022, where all of the analytics were screaming, this is a fluke, this is unsustainable, the point differential is historically bad for a team that won 13 games or whatever, it's the opposite this year. Every analytical measurement is telling you this is real, this is legitimate. And I think the one last remaining piece for people's believability is the quarterback. You're wondering, boy, I mean, can they really keep doing this? Did we just see the bad Sam Darnold manifest, and now that's going to be the guy going forward? I think if it wasn't Sam Darnold as a lightning rod, Thor, I think even more people would buy into this thing as a real 5-0 Super Bowl contender start.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if the quarterback had a different name, people have memories and scars from past incarnations of Sam with other teams. But yeah, this is a different scenario. Certainly, different coaching staff, different personnel, and yeah, to your point, in the past there was. Some of these also where it'd be the close games, whatever. This team, though, it's been the avalanche early, and then they're letting, in the garbage time when they're up by the several touchdowns in the second half, some of these leads disappear. It's really the only thing, but the Packers didn't possess the ball once with a chance to go ahead. It's a contextual point that needs to, and Texans, of course, that needs to be mentioned. But the one thing I was going to say is, love everything about the coaching staff and the play calling. The only one sort of micro area is what you just hit on, Phil, with the garbage time thing. It's the one, like every other time in normal game scripts, it's like, O'Connell and Flores, it's like watching, a masterpiece. It's like watching a portrait being drawn with their play calling. Talked to one of my buddies in the NFL draft world, another guy high up there in the media who does NFL work during the fall. He told me, he said, the Vikings are the very first team that I pop in every Monday when I start watching film, the new week, whatever. It's the first one he wants to watch because of that play calling. But the some of the strategy during the garbage time, and this is going back with, in particular O'Connell, we have seen that in the past, and O'Connell has said it about himself of that's one thing we need to learn when we get those big leads, how to put a team away, and then they don't start chipping away. That's still something that he needs to sort through, because sometimes the play calling gets too cutesy. It's more often that, but then other times it feels like it gets just a little bit too conservative. So that's one thing he needs to modulate. The rest of it, of course, is aces.
There also it's going to be very intriguing, and this likely happens in their first game back from the bye against Detroit, is what happens when it's really close? What happens when they give up the first touchdown and trail and try to come back, which I think they could be absolutely fine. But my point is, like, there are a lot of things we don't know yet. It's only 5 games, so there's a lot to learn. But I think what's been impressive is, starting with training camp, for the most part, this team has handled the adversity they faced previously and stared that down. But like, if you want to talk about points of like concern or things to be seen, what happens when you trail is one. You have to cut down. If you want to go deep in the playoffs, the turnovers have to be cut down. And I'm mainly talking fumbles. Like, you cannot be, they're actually near the top of the league in turnover differential because the defense has been so good. But that's not a playoff thing. Like, you can't continue that. So there are definitely things, but, going back to the most important thing, if you have health, if your health maintains, are you passing tests right now? I think the answer 5 games in is most definitely yes. It doesn't mean there aren't things to clean up.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I mean, it's a good problem. It's a first world problem to have, right? Like, maybe in garbage time, the offensive play calling could be just slightly different. The fact that you're getting into those situations so often, and you've played almost as much by the books garbage time as you have neutral game script time so far this season against the gauntlet schedule that they played, it is kind of ridiculous. But yeah, very impressive. Some small things to button up, but again, like, I don't see this as a negative. I almost see this as a positive data point for the Vikings. I don't know that we have seen the best incarnation of the Vikings so far. We certainly have not seen the full strength Vikings yet. TJ Hawkinson in particular being the guy that I'm referring to, but there was other games with the other injuries and stuff like that. After the bye, that could be the best version of the Vikings we've seen yet this season. And the schedule gets easier after the bye and it opens up. So yeah, things are looking good right now.
How has I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but how has the betting market reacted to the Vikings so far? Because they're 5-0 against the spread right now, right?
Yeah.
I think they are.
They are, yeah. I mean, they haven't come far enough the other way, right? Like, against the Jets, it was the Vikings were 2.5-point favorites. I don't know if right before kickoff it ticked to 3, but the last I'd seen it was 2.5 on a neutral site, right? And so basically, you're saying that the Vikings, are less than a field goal is as good as the Jets. And then the games before that, the spreads have not been there all season. And that's another interesting thing to look at, because the betting market, it's a good idea of some of the sharper people in the market and how that's viewed, people that are actually putting money on these predictions that they're making on outcomes that haven't occurred yet. And after the bye, are the Vikings going to start to get more respect? Very curious to see where, once we get to game week, what the line drops on for the Vikings hosting the Lions. I think that will be really interesting, and put this on Twitter a couple of days ago, but that game, I have not looked forward to an NFL game like I am that one it's been years since I've been that excited for a game, and we're going to get a big referendum on the Vikings in that one as well.
You know, one thing we did this on our Purple Picks Saturday episode. Yeah, we pick the games on Saturday every week, and on Action Network they had, this is just one platform, they had at 2.5 Vikings 2.5. 77% of the bets were on the Vikings, but 75% of the money was coming in on the Jets. So that leads me to believe that bigger money, maybe sharps that have bigger bankrolls, still weren't really believing in the Vikings going into that London game, saying, I'll take 2.5 points and the Jets. And so even after all of that, there was that's my interpretation. There was still some skepticism going into that London game.
Yes, for sure. And Phil, what you're talking, that's a classic indication that the public is on the Vikings, the Sharks are on the Jets. Just a little, and a lot of times, over the large data set, you would of course rather follow the Sharps than the public. But this is situation specific. I'll bring you back to 2019 with the LSU Tigers in college football, a team that in advance of that, the years in advance of that, their offense had been really, really bad. Ed Orgeron had taken over, and they were still using the offense that Les Miles did. The first year that Joe Burrow came over from Ohio State, his passing stats stunk. A guy named, I don't know if you guys have heard of this guy before, Justin Jefferson was on that team. I think he had like 35 catches the year before they entered in 2018. In 2019, when LSU, right from the get, the offense was explosive. The team looked really, really good on the field. The Sharps in the market were still going with their projections and some of the stuff that they had come into the season with, whereas the betting public, they believed their lying eyes of what was on the field of this LSU team is awesome. And so the lines never really got there to reflect the reality of the new LSU team. It was too fast. None of the models could catch up to it, right? Because, going from the one team, now it's a totally new team that just one off season in between. And so you're going to see this in instances like this. This would be an exception to the rule. And the Sharps now, again, they're going to get 2 weeks here. You have the buy in between. Can their modeling pick up or catch up to this? One thing I'll say, too, just a little inside baseball about this, as someone who does the models and the power rankings and set spreads myself. Now, this is in college football. But one thing that I can tell people out there is some of this, especially at the beginning of the season, it's all based on last year's data and then stuff that you bake in based on the changes to the roster and the personnel. Situational assumptions that you're making in college football. Some of the stuff that we do, it's returning production, returning starters, etc. Now, in the NFL, it's no different where you're baking in. It's a combination of last year's data and then some situational assumptions. But the last year's data, it goes away more and more each week. But at the beginning of the season, that's where the statistical models, the math models, where they're going to be. So, yeah, but I expect that stuff to change as we go forward.
And what I don't get about that is I actually get the Darnold concern or doubters. I get that. What I don't understand is, though, don't the Sharps have, I don't know, some type of inner working scouting system? Defensively, they've been wrong the entire time. And the models from last year, like they could have come to us. We could have told them this defense is going to improve, and it wasn't bad.
So Judd Football Focus is a real business model here.
But I mean, if you follow, if you do any work on the Vikings at all, you're like, oh, I see. Brian Flores did the exact same thing. Dolphins year two. He goes from taking a hodgepodge group, and they do okay, and then he gets his personnel in. So this is what I don't get. There still remains a doubt on the defensive side, and it makes no sense. If you make a living off football betting, what are you doing? You're costing yourself money. The Darnold stuff I totally get. That's just doubt. But the defensive stuff was it was basically shoved in your face what they were trying to do. So that one amazed me. And it's still
go to JFF.com and use the code Judd to get your...
I got a cell phone here. Just call me, cut me a little 10% share. That's all I wanted.
Phil will appreciate this as a former poker guy, an online poker guy. Phil, there's a thing where the guy is. We've talked about this, and I think we were out talking about this one time about the guys where they're playing in the 15 games at one, or 20 games at one time on the internet, and they're just going bang, 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 bang. The reason that professional poker players can do that, play in 20 different poker games at the same time, it's because they have an idea, a model in their own head of how you play this specific hand on this flop. When that guy in front of you, he's folded, then the next guy, he's tripled the bet or whatever, and now it's on you. Like they're a computer. What are they not doing? It's the thing of like reading the specific guys at the table. You're basically modeling out their behavior, and then you're making your decisions based on that. Professional sports bettors, they don't have the time or the exposure to follow all 32 teams as close as, for instance, some of the biggest fans or the biggest media of that team are certainly in college with the 134, and a lot of these professional bettors are betting on both. So you have 166 teams in the NFL and the FBS combined. You have to, in some ways, rely initially on that mathematical model. Then you might go into the treetops of the analytical profiles of both teams. Maybe you watch a little film too, but do you have as much exposure going back to the preseason, going back to last season, all this on every single team? Probably not, like by and large. So that's why some of those decisions are based on those projections and those models. That's also how you can get something of an edge. If you have exposure on a team, I was convinced the last 2 weeks that the Vikings were going to win each of those 2 games where the spread was beneath a field goal both times, and they were the underdogs in the one against the Packers. But, again, why is it that way even when the public is behind them? It's because the bigger money's coming in from the sharps. But you have to understand, too, that their thinking can be a bit flawed because of some of these factors.
Yeah. People might notice that Judd Football Focus has a new hat on here today.
Right. That's right.
Why don't you tell us, before we get into some other fun things with our guy Thor Nystrom, what is that hat and why is it part of Purple Daily today?
It says, Stoked, because Grill Masters, I want to talk directly to you. Stoked Barbecue Pellets is a company based and operated right here in our great state. Stoked is the premium pellet that cooks anything you throw on the grill or smoker to absolutely delicious perfection. You can find Stoked items at all 22 Frattallone's hardware and garden stores, perfect for pellet grills and smokers as well. Ideal for actually all types of grills. You can find Stoked Barbecue Pellets at Frattallone's. Let me show you something here, boys. I got the 50-count fire starter buckets right here. Thorsky, Thorsky, you look like a grilling guy to me.
I'm a grilling guy.
Yep, 4-count starter bags, barbecue caddies. You're saying, what's a barbecue caddy? Well, it's only a must-have if you're a grill master as well. Again, available at all 22 Frattallone's hardware and garden stores. Don't go to the big guys. Go with our newest friends at Stoked.
Amen. We're stoked to have them on board here on Purple Daily. Also, Roku TV is America's #1 streaming platform. One of the best decisions my wife and I have made this year is getting a 65-inch Pro Series 4K Roku TV for football season. Automatically adjusts the picture quality for the shows and sporting events that we are glued to. It's just a fantastic, fantastic TV that fills up the living room with. So I've got YouTube TV, so I can watch 4 different football games, the quad box, if you will. Roku.com to learn more or shop at a retailer near you. So I'm gonna hit and run here with a question because I have to go catch a flight at LaGuardia so I can get back to Minneapolis. But I want to throw this out. We kind of touched on this ourselves last week, but now, Thor, that you have been able to consume the first 5 weeks of this year's rookie quarterback class, the guys that have played, Jaden Daniels, who's on fire, and Bo Nix, and then who am I missing here? Caleb Williams, #1 overall pick. Our question last week was, would you go back in time and give up a boatload more draft capital for Jaden Daniels, or are you still comfortable standing pat with J.J. McCarthy, who we aren't going to see? Now that you've seen Jaden Daniels out there, and I don't even know that there was a price that they would have said yes to, but what do you make of Jaden Daniels? Are you still comfortable not giving up a boatload moving up in retrospect, and what do you think of the quarterback class you've seen so far?
Jaden Daniels has been incredible. Yeah, and his game was viable at the NFL level right away, and great for the Commanders for getting him. But as to the question of, like, if you could do a sliding doors, Doctor Strange type alternate reality thing, trade up for him, I don't think it was an option. The Bears they told Caleb Williams months before the draft that they were going to take him, and Washington zeroed in on Jaden pretty early too. I think it was just lip service, any sort of trade thing. The Patriots, would they have taken Jaden? The Washington wasn't even going to consider, the possibility that they might lose out on him by trading down one spot. So I think the real hypothetical is, would you have met the Patriots asking price for 3? I mean, that was the real thing.
Yep.
Now the price was crazy high. And the Patriots, according to reports afterwards, they would have then used equity to try to move back up and get JJ. And they could have done that, in hindsight, after we saw that the Giants didn't take him. My answer, of course, is no. I think the Vikings got the right guy, and they got him at the correct price point as well. I've said this before. If JJ McCarthy had gone back to school, he declared as a true junior, had just turned 20, just turned 21 before the NFL draft, but he was 20 during that last season at Michigan. If he had come back for his true senior season, first off, Michigan would not be having the acute issues that they are having on offense. Now, I find it funny that the people that argued to me about box score stats all spring about JJ McCarthy, where have you gone now that the Michigan offense has gone into the tank? But if he had gone back to school there, JJ McCarthy would have been the number 1 pick in this coming club with a bullet. He would have been QB1. He would have been the first overall prospect heading into the season. So the Vikings made the right decision. The limited looks we got of him, certainly in the preseason game against the Raiders, injury was unfortunate, but he is going to be back 100%. There's going to be nothing recurring with that. The meniscus thing that they did, full repair, and he can come back 100%. The Vikings made the correct decision. And not only that, as far as the guy himself, they also, and I thought this was the more impressive thing, they played the board like maestros in not panicking to trade up ahead of the Giants. I heard after the fact that there was, and I don't know if this is out publicly, but I think I can say it at this point. Jim Harbaugh was asked privately. Now, I wasn't in this conversation, but let's just say I heard from a reliable source about why didn't you trade with the Vikings? Like on the clock, didn't you want to move back? The offer wasn't there. That's why they didn't. And so why wasn't the offer there? Because the Vikings made that situational assumption of, we think the Giants are bluffing. The Giants, they had made a big deal of their interest in McCarthy, and McCarthy said he spent the most time with them. But then the Giants bypass him. Then you knew he was going to fall down a little bit, and it allowed the Vikings to keep their first round pick next year and not have to totally blow that up. And then also you have the second first round pick where then you moved up to get Dallas Turner. The right prospect was taken, the right decision was made, and you played the board beautifully there.
And the conversation about Jaden is fun, especially now that he's playing great. But the reality is this. I think that you're right. Washington was not going to trade. Like those first 2 picks, it turned out were locked.
They were locked.
They were not going to make trades.
Yep.
If they had, or let's say you go up and get Drake May. The question then is, what was the price? So you don't get Dallas Turner then, which I know right now you're like, well, he's not playing much. I think he's going to be a hell of a player. You don't get him then. You got to give up more first round picks. Like that becomes the question too. What would have been the price? And the Vikings, to your point, Thor, answered that by the fact that they clearly made the Patriots an offer and said, this is it. And the Patriots said, no thanks. And that was it. Did the Vikings get a little bit fortunate on the board with McCarthy? Probably a little bit. They could have ended up with Penix if the Falcons. I mean, what's weird is the Giants were bluffing, but the Falcons came out of nowhere off the top rope.
That is crazy.
Like that quarterback pick, that could have been McCarthy. We don't know. I think it played out as well as it possibly can. I also think what we're seeing is that you have a head coach here who is very good with quarterbacks, and that makes a difference. So like if we went back to take your pick, quarterback X, and it's great guy, but Les Frazier, head coach. Well, then that comes out completely different. So watching Jaden Daniels is fun, and I think he's great, but I think that's an old school Vikings train of thought, because that's the one of, oh my God, they didn't get that quarterback and now it's hopeless. I mean, Kevin O'Connell, you got to sort of take a step back, take a deep breath as a Vikings fan and say, things are different. Like, this is not the same franchise. And my thing was, and I was eventually right, but Rick Spielman I think he got fired because he couldn't do it. He couldn't find him and they couldn't develop him. Thor, it clearly appears to me now that the Vikings have a coach that can work with and develop a QB and a front office that was savvy enough to play what might have been considered a dangerous game, but ultimately, I think in the end, worked out well.
That's for sure. Yeah. And again, I love Jaden Daniels' game. I actually ranked Jaden Daniels ahead of JJ on my board very slightly. Caleb 1, Jaden 2. I had JJ McCarthy 3. Both quarterbacks and overall draft rankings like that. But, we talked in the spring about if the Vikings had – now this is – going back to the Thor's days during NFL draft season when we would do the mock drafts. And, of course, the quarterbacks were a topic of discussion a lot because heading into the last draft, we were pretty sure the Vikings were going to take one there. And before it had come out that basically Jaden Daniels was the apple of Washington's eye, there was a thought that there would be a possibility that he could filter down or that there would be a possible trade up. Talked about there how if that happened, I love Jaden's game, but there would have to be some both modulations to the Vikings' scheme in facilitating Jaden Daniels' game, and then sort of vice versa. O'Connell, he likes the guys to sort of follow the script. We got it all for you. The decisions are sort of mapped out. You see this, that's what you're going to do. You're going to go to the second one. You see that, this look, this is the guy you're going to go to. Jaden Daniels is more of the creator, and certainly Caleb Williams is even more like that. But Jaden, he wants to make the decision in the moment. Escapes containment and running downfield way more often than we have seen Vikings quarterbacks in recent years. And then sort of his ethos with ripping the ball and stuff. How would that have molded in with O'Connell? That would have been, we would have to see. But obviously a tremendous player, love his game. But yeah, JJ McCarthy, I think, just in terms of fit, was a better fit for that O'Connell system. You don't have to modulate anything for that. He played in the 12 personnel offense at Michigan, won the national title for a sitting NFL head coach, Jim Harbaugh, that said he was the best prospect in the last draft. Obviously, the Chargers didn't end up needing didn't need a quarterback because of Justin Herbert. But yeah, the Vikings made the right call along. Doesn't take anything away from Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is going to be a stud. But yeah, it's more of the Randall Cunningham type game with Jaden. Whereas again, O'Connell more the watchmaker type. Follow this instruction, follow that instruction. Bang, 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 and JJ is going to do that. And we've seen Sam do that so far.
Mm-hmm. Thor, I think we'll probably have maybe a bigger conversation on this in the next week or week after that. But do the Vikings need to add anything at the trade deadline? Do you want to see them add anything? I know they have limited draft capital going into the draft. That makes things a little bit more complicated. But trade deadline time, do you think a defensive lineman's worth going after? Maybe another running back if Aaron Jones' injury flares up more. Do you think that this team should still lean in to being a buyer at the trade deadline, or should they keep their chips more in-house?
You guys said the poll ads right before or when we were getting on, they put the team up for sale.
Yes, they did.
Right? Why did the public turn on the poll ads so much where I don't know anything about it? I don't really even follow baseball that close, but I know that all the Twins fans were furious at them because they didn't get aggressive, because they didn't invest in the team. When you have a shot, you have to at least explore it. The Vikings, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you are now you're on that short list of contenders for the highest trophy in sport, in my opinion. And in that scenario, now the draft equity is what it is. You have to protect that first round pick too. The third rounder, that I would probably protect that too. You do have 2 5ths though, and what is it in day 3? It's the 2 5ths and. Is that it on day 3? Or do they have they have a 7th that they got from the Steelers. But you could do a couple different things. If the third was to get involved in a trade, you could do the pick swap. If it was a player of more import, or the 2 5ths and the 7th. Here's the thing to keep in mind. The positions that the Vikings need, or that I shouldn't say need, they don't really need anything. They're the best team in the NFL with the roster they have. But the positions where they could augment or improve, or certainly the depth, but the starting lineup as well. Some of those positions, you can get that done with the later day 3 type picks with these teams who are totally out of it. You mentioned interior defensive lineman. Could they add another cornerback to the roster? Could you add another off-ball linebacker? You mentioned the thing if Jones's injury turns out to be worse, running back. Those aren't positions that cost anything in trades. So the 2 5ths and the 7th, you should be able to figure something out. That if even a pick swap, you offer a team of 5th for their 6th, and then a guy that is going to enter your defensive rotation. The teams that stink, that's the kind of price tag they get on players at those positions. You have to explore it if you're the Vikings. Keep an eye on the Jones injury status, like how that's going. The news, you get back on that, but also augmenting that defense. That would also help Flores, both with the depth, but then also giving different looks to the opposing offensive coordinator so they can't try to solve this complex puzzle that they're given during game week based on the film that they have up till this point.
Speaking of improve, I actually have a question, Thorsky, for you off of this. But speaking of improvement, I want to talk about my friends at uglydeck.com who want to improve your deck because their mission is to rid the world of all of those awful, ugly decks. Book a free deck estimate this month. Get 3 free footings included with that. Just need a deck tweak. Get up to $1,000 off installation or a DIY deck package. For the DIYer, Ugly Deck can install your footings and ledger and save you from the mess and frustration on the hardest part of building a deck. If you want the top carpenters and maintenance-free decks, this is how Sports Dad rolls, because they can build your entire deck. They build year-round. You see them right there. So book a free estimate today for a new deck this year. Go to uglydeck.com. Uglydeck.com, again, to book your free estimate because they're going to get rid of all of those awful decks. And at the trade deadline, you can get rid of your deck. Thor, what do you think? So one is I could also see trading, let's say, a future third, a future pick in a deadline deal. But if I was to tell you right now, of all the positions that you just went through, that there was one position at which you could make a pretty substantial trade, again, let's say it's a team that's out of it. So they would take the draft pick back. Perhaps you take on some salary as well. What position would you pursue in particular, and how aggressive do you think the Vikings should be? Because while I think their team is good, you're never perfect, and you can always guard against injury, especially with older players, i.e. a guy like Jones.
I think for this team I think for me it would be interior defensive line. And yeah, the Vikings, I think in EPA per run, they're number 2, in EPA per pass, they're number 2. Obviously, the defense is really, really good. But adding to that, adding another guy to the rotation, and maybe he would be the guy in the starting lineup, could only help on that defensive front and just creating even more havoc. That's probably the position that I would look at. But I think the fact that the list of positions where you could potentially upgrade with a trade is so small, I think it speaks to how well this roster has been put together. And sure, you're a little bit short on draft equity, but now the complaining about that and the consternation from in the spring, it seems a little bit silly, doesn't it? That the Vikings, they only have that late round 3 pick, and
I never understood that.
They gave up so much and yada yada. Now those picks are all going to be at the end of the round. We'll see how late they are. But the picks that you have left, you still have the ability to go out there and swing some trades, and you better believe that Kwesi's going to be on the phone.
Last year, was the Ezra Cleveland trade a year ago, or was that 2 deadlines ago? I think it was last year, correct?
Last year.
So they sold a guard, which came a little bit of a surprise, but then he was going to enter free agency, so they're able to get something back. I mean, is there a situation, too, where they maybe get ammunition, Thor, to stack in the chamber to then use again to flip, right? Like, I don't know who the Vikings would actually sell on, and because they're 5-0, but I wonder if there's like a fringe player, too, that they could use as maybe a poker chip to stack, to double down on their next bet. Like, I wonder if there's going to be actually more than just buying at the deadline. They might have to sell some stuff to get more equity so they can put their chips in the middle of the table for a big trade.
Yeah, I just wonder who that would be. Someone out of favor that another, that's not a key part to the team that another team could use in that way. The more realistic scenario would be, I think, the pick, the future picks or whatever, beyond this coming class, where you're a little bit pick poor right now. You do have that first round pick. But again, I think that the fact that a player at one of the premium positions is not needed. You don't need an offensive tackle. You don't need a quarterback. You don't need an edge rusher, et cetera. Those are the guys that typically go for the higher trade compensation. So I think the Vikings can augment the roster that they have, the really good roster that they have, with, by searching around and then situationally finding things where using those day 3 picks and potentially that 3rd round comp, which can now be traded. They used to not be able to trade the comp picks. Now you can. You could use something like that in trade, more realistically, probably the 2/5 and the 7th, but that you could use something in some configuration. But yeah, if they had to, and it was a guy that they're like, this dude is going to clearly take us to the next level, I think the thing that they would have to do is dip into the future years. And that's where it gets a little bit hairy. I'm always trepidatious about it. I think if the price is right, you pull off that transaction, but don't get wild with it. It's the same thing we talked about during draft season when, the hypothetical that Phil brought up before about the would you trade for Drake, man, that's not my take now. It was my take then as well, right? You can't pony up I think the report was 3 first-rounders and change is what New England was looking for there. It's no different here. But, as far as that trade goes, you think about it in hindsight, there were so many people at the time, oh, you got to do whatever it takes to go and get your guy. The price does not matter. The price matters in everything, man. This is a business. There's a set of rules for every single team, parameters. You get this amount of draft picks every single year. You're in your slot, whatever. You have this much salary cap space as well. The thing with Drake May, it would have been J.J. McCarthy, Dallas Turner, plus the first-round pick. And I'll toss, the amount of picks that they used to move up for Dallas Turner. We'll count that as the garnish of 3 first-round picks plus. But basically, that's the trade you would have made. Who would make that right now? Certainly I wouldn't. But the same goes here. You can't go overboard because it's, we have to win the Super Bowl this year. You can't do business like that. But you absolutely have to search around and hopefully find a guy at the right price point that can augment your roster.
Absolutely. And I think, what's changed too, Thor, is this. Kevin O'Connell's success with Darnold, I think because he was successful with Kirk, but Kirk was an established guy, right? And so it's like, okay, he's getting a lot from Kirk, but Kirk's pretty good. I think the success with Darnold gives you even more cause to say, okay, this guy is really good at this particular skill set, which might be among the most important skill sets that a coach can have in football, developing the QBs, right? So now it goes from, well, they really like Drake May, and what happens if they don't get Drake May to, hold on a second here. This guy basically has turned, to a large degree, as much as one can, Sam Darnold around. J.J. McCarthy, in the glimpse that we got, looked damn good. So, it's hard for us. I'll go back to what I said from the previous regimes. I think it's hard for Vikings fans to have in their head an idea of what happens if a coach is good with QBs. Like the last offensive mind that walked through that building, who I think really deserved respect, was Dennis Green. And his last year was, 2001. So, Childress was supposed to be that guy. He clearly was not. Then we went to a slew of defensive guys. So I think what's hard is, from my standpoint too, my thought process at one time was, well, they've got to get the quarterback that they want, because if they don't, can they coach this guy up? I think what O'Connell has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt so far is, oh yeah, he can. That changes everything. And, again, go to training camp. What we saw, your guy McCarthy looked fantastic. So I think the future is incredibly bright here. And I don't think it's with Sam Darnold. I think the future is with J.J. McCarthy.
That's it. Yeah. And to your point about O'Connell, recall that Josh Dobbs was viable 2 days after he came in the door, and the Vikings offense has continued, in the past, even when Cousins was injured. And the record that O'Connell has when his starter is not injured is ludicrous. You'd put that up there, his first 3 years, whatever. You put that up there with anyone as far as the winning percentage in those games. But yeah, the handpicked guy was taken there in the top 10. This is after you already made an organizational decision to move on from Kirk in order to open up the war chest of cap space. Probably with what you're saying in mind, Judd, that O'Connell, once he's no longer the quarterback killer in Egan, and he actually chooses his guy, and it's like, this is the dude.
Right.
And now you have him on that contract. The cap situation has opened up to what it is. This is the way they're going to construct this roster. No matter how well Sam plays this year, they made the Super Bowl, whatever. Now the price of him just skyrockets. You're not going to turn around one off season later and give the cap space that you were going to, that you chose to walk out the door with Kirk to another quarterback that had the 1 year sample size of success with the top 10 quarterback there. And that's even beyond how much O'Connell has expressed that JJ is our future and how excited he was for his development.
Absolutely. Hey, Dex, why don't you tell us about your friends in the golf world from PXG?
That's right. My friends at PXG have helped upgrade my golf game, which I'm very excited for. It's fall golf season. It's the best time of year for golf, in my opinion. I'll be swinging the sticks this weekend. Very excited for that. And if you want to upgrade your sticks, if you want to go to PXG, there's locations all across the nation. So our family here that loves Purple Daily and supports the Vikings, and you're also a golfer, or maybe you'd like to get into golf, go to PXG. And in fact, PXG.com/purple will give you $10 off a club, a special promo just for Purple Daily listeners. Shout out to PXG. That's PXG.com/purple.
All right, boys. Great stuff, Thor. We will talk to you next week. And we will then have, and as you said earlier in the show, and I was going to stop you because it was hilariously funny, but it's totally accurate. Not only is this as excited as you've been for a Vikings game in ages, but it's against the Detroit bleeping Lions. Like I said that yesterday. I'm super stoked. Haha. How about that? For a game against the Detroit Lions, and I'm justified. Like when is like you've grown up with that game, and basically so did I, with that game being like here's a noon piece of crap. It's Lions.
Yeah, the atmosphere around the stadium before and during that game is going to be absolutely incredible. And then, the information that we get from that game and what that says about both teams, I can't wait. I'm happy that there's a bye right now to digest what has happened and to prepare for what is to come. But man, that is, I can't wait. Can't wait.
It's going to be fantastic. All right, Dex, take us home.
Hit the like button, subscribe button. Happy Thor's Day to all who celebrate. We'll have a Feedback Friday tomorrow. We'll have some special episodes too this weekend. Purple Access on Saturday. We'll have a special episode on Sunday in lieu of a Vikings game. So we're still going to have plenty of content, daily Vikings entertainment. This is Purple Daily, where we just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die.